Internet, hello and welcome to our weekly water cooler conversation. Today we are talking about Loki episode 2, and if you have somehow not caught one of these before, it is one of my favorite things to do of the week, and we go into full spoilers. So this will be full spoilers for Loki episode 2, which was the episode that dropped last night at midnight. It is a doozy. It is one of those episodes that really changes the entire fabric of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe might become. So, if you have not yet watched it, I will not give you many more chances to know that there are going to be the biggest spoilers abounding in this conversation. Giant, mega spoilers. Also, somehow, if you skipped episode 1, there will be spoilers for episode 1 and 2 as we dive into comic references, which there were few of this time, lots of strange Easter eggs, and most importantly, in-universe existential quandaries. I think what I'm enjoying most about this is that it's very much about Loki discovering himself, and what a more interesting way to do that than through a detective show. So there's lots of things to dive into. Episode 2 of Loki is absolutely everything you'd want out of a detective show. It's everything you need out of David Fincher-esque programming, and it actually feels straight up like Mindhunter. The flavor of the show is like nothing I've seen Marvel do or come close to. The detective nature of it is actually what I really want out of Matt Reeves' Batman. It's a very serious tone while having lots of great levity. It has charm for days, but it's not fun in the more traditional phase 1, 2, and 3 sense. It is a much more somber, serious, with moments of jest because of who they got with the glory of Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston, but it is a very serious show. And what I'm really enjoying, especially this episode, is it's a detective show kind of about Loki discovering himself. Loki, in searching for variants of himself, has to look at himself and digest who he is. So it's more about what Loki discovers about Loki in the external and internal sense that really drives this show. And then on top of that, you've got someone commenting on the experience of what drives Loki externally and internally with Owen Wilson. And it's really interesting how Owen Wilson is intellectually charming in this show. He's less emotionally charming. Usually Owen Wilson plays in these great Wes Anderson films a very emotionally charming, very Texan, very smarm, but in a positive way. He's outsmarting everyone. He's able to be more cunning than the God of Mischief. He's able to manipulate, I think, a lot of the people of the TVA. He's actually reshaping what the world is in his own way by being so impossibly smart. So I'm a big fan of the way they're using intellectualism as, in a way, a superpower. Loki is the God of Mischief, but we've got Mobius outsmarting him at every turn, and I still don't know who we're going to consider the good guys at the end of the show. The TVA still seems very fascist to me. They still seem like an authoritarian regime, and I feel like Mobius might break from them. I feel like Mobius might see the error in those ways since he's already kind of going against a lot of their wishes. Very, very intrigued by all of that going forward. But what I'm enjoying most of all is the active detective work of Loki discovering himself. And that is very visual in this episode. It's very distinctly Loki in the variants and all those things. We're going to break it down. Every episode gets better and better. And now that I've warned you all about spoilers, the end of this episode is arguably the biggest thing since the blip in a very specific way. The multiverse is going to change everything. The multiverse is going to change phase 4, it's going to change phase 5, it's going to change what Marvel is. I'm fairly certain this is the multiverse's catalyst because it tracks for all the storyline reasons, but also for the visuals we've had with the Ancient One. I'm very aware that this could be as big as the blip going forward, lead directly into Doctor Strange 2. I'm pretty sure this leads right into Spider-Man. It's going to be really interesting what that moment is long term. The scared little boy shivering in the cold. It's a very small line. They don't put a lot of weight on it. They don't milk it, but that is Loki. And what I love about Tom Hiddleston's portrayal is very much the God of Mischief, but we're seeing more private, intimate moments with just Loki when he's by himself. There's very much a sense of, I'm tricking them, but this is my actual experience. A great example is this episode where we've got him discovering Asgard, much like he discovered his mom and dad passing in the last episode, and that was a moment for him by himself. And then Asgard, he took a moment to mourn. That is everyone he's ever known. That is his home that was destroyed. But then moments later, when he's talking about Mobius, it's a flippant, like, oh, that doesn't matter. There's two different Lokis. There's the public Loki and the private Loki. And we've always seen Loki as this little brother that wants to be taken seriously. He's a god that doesn't get revered. He's a god that's seeking praise. He's a god that's wanting the attention of others because it doesn't come automatically. So all Loki's ever wanted was attention. All Loki's ever wanted was love. When you're the god of mischief, how do you do that? How do you get attention? And we've talked in the show about predetermined design. We've talked in the show about fate versus choice. And I think a lot of that has to do with Loki looking at what he's had to do to be the god of mischief and rule and be the king that he thinks he is versus what he actually wants. So I've really enjoyed seeing these great acting moments from Tom Hiddleston where he's a different person when he's just by himself, when he's studying, when he's being a good boy, his moments of pride and discovery, the moments of him studying and like having the aha epiphanies and being jubilant, those are very different than any of the Lokis you get out there. But also at the end of the episode, we've got him looking over Agent 15's body, and we don't see it. It looks like he's checking up on her, which would imply being a hero, which would imply a very positive. He could have been looking for weapons. He also could have taken something off her. He could have taken one of the time turner things. We don't know. God of Mischief. Very fun character to dissect. I'm so glad we get 6 hours. I think 12. I think they're going to announce season 2. As soon as this is over, I think they're going to be like, by the way, we already filmed season 2. It comes out, blah, blah, blah. You're welcome. I'm pretty sure this is the best character to get this time because it's so Shakespearean. There's so much nuance and elegance in both the God mode of portrayal, like when he's in Pompeii, like when he's being mischievous, like when he's referencing goats, which was a fun little nod to Loki himself, but also in the nuance moments of him dissecting what it means to embody who he wants to be, what it means to become a better person if he is a hero. And the song use in this episode, I Need a Hero, is that about Loki? Is that about him finding himself? Is that about him becoming his own hero? These are the questions I have. Also, there's an Easter egg in this episode, which may be my favorite audio Easter egg in the history of Marvel, period. In all of the years of Marvel, I think that is probably my favorite. I'll get there. All right, we've also got, I love Miss Minutes and the fact that we've gone full Roger Rabbit Cool World. We had a full-on Roger Rabbit sequence in this episode. It was amazing to see Tom Hiddleston interacting with a cartoon. And it is a very, very tangible in the real world cartoon in the sense that he was hitting at it with a magazine, a jet ski magazine, also the jet ski sequence, darling. But this maybe is setting up. This is my tinfoil hat theory of the week. This is my absolutely absurd theory of the week. We saw recently the Spider-Man 4 glitch. I don't think there's going to be a scene where an animated Spider-Man is interacting with a live-action Spider-Man. I'm wondering if there's a scene in a portal or something multiversal, depending on how they show the multiverse, where we maybe see an Into the Spider-Verse character in Spider-Man 3. Now, it could just be a storyline nod with that glitch. It could be the fact that they might be doing a Spider-Verse story, but what if we did have a full-on cartoon. We did have a full-on Roger Rabbit with Loki in this episode with Miss Minutes. So it is a very, very fun little setup to how insane this universe can get. Miss Minutes is such a fun character because she's able to give exposition in a very fun way. She's able to give exposition in a way that doesn't feel like you're being pandered to, but also it's a good way for Loki to learn and be countered, so it's not just Loki spouting exposition constantly, because this is a very exposition-heavy show. What person hasn't meditated and gone on a walkabout of trying to figure out who they are? What person hasn't tried to dissect all of their choices and everything else and like their past misdeeds and their past good deeds and their past choices? I really like that it is a show about looking at yourself in the most literal sense, and it's a show about existential crises, and they're doing it. So really, really fun detective work. Mobius and Loki both trying to outwit each other, with Mobius actually in a moment knowing that Loki is lying. That's inspired. I really enjoyed that we later in the episode found out that he was buying time for the variant in his mischievous ploy, which also is just potentially him trying to get that Loki variant on his side. We'll talk more about her in a bit. But it also could have been him trying to test Mobius. Also, Mobius being able to detect his lies. There's so much in that one little sequence that reveals the relationship between these two. The casting is perfect. The show would not work nearly as well without Owen Wilson. Very good stuff. I genuinely believe everyone's motivations. I believe Owen Wilson's motivations. I believe the TVA thinks they're right. I believe Loki's motivations, even though he doesn't know what they are yet, but I believe they're very in tune with the character. What I think I'm liking the most about the writing is that everyone feels completely justified in every sentence they say, and everything leads to the next thing in a very interesting, beautiful way. So, a lot of love for the motivations and the arcs in the show. The way Owen Wilson feeds on his psychoanalysis of Loki to manipulate Loki, while Loki is attempting to manipulate everyone, including us, the audience, is astounding. I love that Loki is effectively manipulating us because he's acting differently in front of others versus by himself. I love that Loki is just a god of manipulation, but he's being manipulated by Owen Wilson. Kind of just got into that, but it truly is my favorite part of the show. Also, the more traditional Loki learns about the rules. We learn about the rules through his video studies exposition was very clever. The deep confusion of timey-wimey, time travel, timelines, all of that stuff is handled very well in the show because we've got Loki giving us exposition as he learns. We've got Miss Minutes giving us the rules of the thing. We've got the TVA constantly giving us actually what the directives are. So I think by the time we get to Doctor Strange, by the time we get to more time multiverse hijinks, this show will be a very good base to really get everything sorted. Roxxon, guys. Okay, so Roxxon is one of the big in-universe companies in Marvel. So there's Stark, there's Roxxon, there's Hammer, there's these foundational companies because Marvel is, as always, a commentary on the world. And right now, in a very conglomerate capitalistic society, there are enemies within that world that are addressed. Immortal Hulk has a whole arc about Roxxon, but so does Jason Aaron's Thor run. Jason Aaron's Thor run just wrapped up, and it's one of the most prolific of any comic book runs of all time. No one wrote Thor that long, even Walt Simonson, and it's genius. Roxxon is a very big part of it. Rock's cart being so important in this episode and being clear as day and lights, I think Roxxon and some of those storylines might actually bring our storyline to Thor 4. I think there's some Jane Foster stuff we can do with Roxxon. I think there's some villains we can do with Roxxon. I think there was a rumor about Christian Bale playing a character that would have tied directly into Roxxon that isn't in fact who he's playing, but that might mean that character pops up in another way. So keep an eye on Roxxon. It's a fun villainous empire. I do think it's not the end of us seeing it in the series or in Thor 4 going forward. More Lokis than almost any other variant is a really interesting plot point. In this episode, they show a bunch of Loki variants, and they talk about how Loki's kind of their main problem. He's one of their main problems. The question is, who is more than Loki? Who's more than the God of Mischief? I'd imagine Kang. I'd imagine time travelers, I'd imagine those things, but he's the one that has the most variants, and that would make sense for a mischievous scamp like he calls himself many times, but it does raise the question, will we see other people that have that many variables? Will the second season become Loki hunting other people? Does Loki become a TVA agent? That's, joked about multiple times in this episode, but I think Loki would have a lot of fun with that. Again, I think TVA is a negative. I think the TVA is an enemy. So many questions. It was really cool to see a bunch of different Lokis. His face when the jacked Loki popped up was hilarious. The only one of those Lokis that I recognize from the comic books, it was the Viking Loki. Viking Loki popped up late in the Jason Aaron Thor run. He's got like a fur collar and like a full horn crown mask helmet, and he popped up briefly. I did like that jacked Loki looked like Ultimate Green Goblin. That felt like an ultimate nod to me anyway. So there's a bunch of different Lokis that pop up, and they were very fun. Very intrigued by what Gugu Mbatha-Raw's motivations are. She seems to be one of the few people that actually speaks with the Time Keepers directly. I think with that throwaway line from Owen Wilson that he's never even met with them, plus him using that as a ploy to try to get Loki to believe in him, the classic hey, cop on the edge, do this and things will be better, or hey, this person that's working for the cops that doesn't want to be a snitch, if you do this you get clemency. It's that old trope, again, a very good Mindhunter, Fincher procedural. Since Owen doesn't even talk to the Timekeepers, it seems like she's one of the only ones that does, but we've also very briefly seen those gentlemen in sashes. In that one sequence in the first episode, those guys with sashes makes me think there is a hierarchy of these TVA creations, that maybe those are the people that speak with the Timekeepers. They keep referring to them as giant lizard people, or Loki does as an insult, but I'm really curious if one of them is in fact Kang. The center Timekeeper in all of the images looks a lot like Kang. The center behind her in the statues, that looks like Kang. I do wonder if we get Kang sooner than later. I know he's been cast. I really am curious if the Timekeepers are characters we'll recognize, or Kang plus 2 characters we'll recognize. It is interesting that they haven't really given us anything about the structure of things when time ends. They started getting to it in this one, where if you unravel time and make everything order, that's the goal. That's what they want. But again, that does seem like predetermined design, and that's when you get into the crazy existential quandaries of what those timekeepers want. If they're real in the traditional sense, what cosmic blowout will we get to by the end of this? Will we have the living tribunal? Will we have the concepts of time? In the comic books, the concepts of death and time and the expanse of space, all these abstract concepts are tangible beings that are represented through how we perceive them. For example, Galactus is probably the most common of these entities that doesn't actually look like a giant guy with a big purple helmet. That's how we, in our mere mortal, weak minds, perceive him. So there's these infinite creatures that we perceive in the way that we can digest with our minds. So I'm really curious if we get into those elements as we go forward and those kind of characters. But I do think Kang might be one of them as we get into it. The Pompeii situation is so fun, because you've got the cop on the edge Loki, you've got the too old for this shit Mobius, which is exactly buddy cop energy, but most importantly, you've got a lot of plot development. We discover something that Loki finds within the TVA's exact purview that they've never seen, seemingly. So we've got not just a fun little goat reference, which references his mischievousness and certain god elements of Greek mythology, but also we get to go to Pompeii in the same episode as we go to a future Walmart. Like, it is so much fun what they can do with this show. I love the D.B. Cooper moment in the first episode, love the Pompeii moment in this episode. I really hope they keep playing with these giant historic moments in such an interesting plot pushing way, because it never feels wasted. Like, what a great opportunity for that. The variant energy was brought up, and it makes me wonder if not just you don't see the variant in that because it's about to end, but also is Lady Loki a variant? And we'll talk about that here in just a minute, because there's a credit which makes it look like she might not be Lady Loki at all, which is intriguing. We've got, I never cared more about jet skis. I loved Owen Wilson's love of jet skis so very much. He's fascinatingly stuck in, like, the 90s. The Josta soda, the jet skis, his references, a lot of that is very 90s, and I'm wondering if we'll find out, that maybe these TVA agents weren't created, they were sculpted. They were taken instead of sculpted. They were pulled from a timeline. Maybe Owen Wilson's guy who thinks he was created by the TVA is actually from the 90s. I'm really curious about, like, why it's so specific, because jet skis, Josta, his references, it does seem like, the writing is so good it wouldn't be an accident. I hope we see Owen Wilson on our jet ski by the end of the season. I hope Mobius gets his jet ski moment. It seems like he needs it. We've got Agent 20 being fantastically played by, I think her name is Sasha Lane. She's from American Honey. She's from Hearts Beat Loud. She's a fantastic actress. It's real mind break is one of the more open-ended setups we've had on any of these shows since WandaVision. Falcon Winter Soldier gave us a lot of cliffhangers, but we haven't really had a mystery box as much in this show or in that one. And what is It's Real? Is it Kang? Is it the concept of blank? Is it, like, what could she have seen that would warp her mind that way? And, Sylvie was in her Lady Loki. I'm going to call her Lady Loki until we talk about it. But Lady Loki was, controlling her with her abilities. So does that mean that she had access to her thoughts while it was, like, back and forth? We don't really know how those powers work. Loki, Team Loki. Loki, Team Loki variants. Loki, Team TVA. Who is Loki at any given moment motivated by besides himself? He's obviously serving his own interests, but they did such a good job having Loki just believable enough in any direction that you don't know who he's working for. I don't know if that was a betrayal in the last moment to Owen Wilson, because I believe they're friends, but the whole point of what he's doing is to make us believe that they're friends. All of his pride, all of his little moments of jubilance privately aren't shared with Owen Wilson. When he's with Owen Wilson, he's making manipulative moves to try to get Owen Wilson to trust him, and vice versa. I don't know if Loki actually wants to take down the TVA with the other variants. I don't know if he wants to do it by himself. I know he wants to rule, but he's also more and more seeing that he's not meant to rule. He elevates others' potential. He's also the god of storytelling. So all of this ties into the big mystery of what Loki's going to end up doing, what his actual motivations are. I loved him at the end saying, I'm trying to recruit you, be my left hand, because I believe it in that moment, but of course I do. He's manipulating that person too. Fascinating all around. I don't personally believe that when the red line crosses out past the apex, that the universe ends. I think the TVA is lying to us. I think it's lying to Mobius. I think maybe just the timekeepers and the judge know the truth. I don't think it's that simple. I think that launches the multiverse, which is what the end of the episode does. I said at the top of this that the biggest moment in arguably the show is the end of the second episode, but that is also kind of what kicks off phase 4. The multiverse has begun. This is a zeitgeist shift in the power structure. As much as the fun Infinity War line moment was in the first one with the gems being paperweights, this is an even bigger thing because this changes every variability. Now we can have infinite versions of all of our characters. Now we can see characters that died come back. Now we can see storylines that wouldn't necessarily be canon in the standard MCU that could be canon elsewhere. Now all of this is fair game because of one screenshot at the end of the episode. That also means episode 3 is about to be absolutely insane. But in interviews, Mr. Tom Hiddleston has said that episodes 4 and 5 are like a 2-hour movie of pure insanity. So 3 is multiverse. What can 4 and 5 possibly be? Like popping around the multiverse, bringing in all these characters. We don't know who's going to pop up. I also am really enjoying that people not ruining or trying to guess cameos. We cannot guess where the show is going. It is too big and it goes too many places. In one episode, we went to a Walmart and Pompeii. There's no way to anticipate. So it's really been nice as a pundit of the space to not have people trying to guess like they did with WandaVision, like I did with WandaVision. It's a much more enjoyable experience because of how insane it is. The multiverse is here. The multiverse is real. We've seen all of the lines diverge, and now everything's fair game. But I don't think that that woman is Lady Loki. I think she's Enchantress, because in the credits, Enchantress is listed in, I think it's the Spanish credits. There's her character's named Sylvie, and in the comic books, Sylvie is famously the Enchantress who wears green, who has horns, who is bestowed with Loki's power at points. I'm really wondering if maybe a Loki variant gave her powers, if she stole powers from a Loki variant. Enchantress is a big, big bad. She lives by her own rules, she has her own motivations, but she's very self-serving and a very big bad. What intrigues me is we've only seen the character for like 3 minutes, but it seemed to me she wasn't doing something out of, I think she's just trying to destroy the TVA. It doesn't feel as self-serving as I'd imagine Loki would. I think she just wants to create chaos because she doesn't believe the TVA is fair. Because if there's only one timeline, that means everything outside of that, that's trillions and trillions of lives, are negated. So maybe Enchantress or Loki, we don't know exactly who she is trying to allow more people to exist, allow more timelines to flourish, allow all these things. So to me, it seems like that was more of an end of the TVA than it was a sneeze. It seemed to me more about ending the TVA than it did about causing death. It seemed to me like it's going to free a lot of people, because sometimes you need chaos to create freedom. I'm really intrigued by her motivations and whether or not she ends up being a hero or a villain or a Lady Loki or an Enchantress. So many questions. Let's get into the Easter eggs I liked most. All right, Easter eggs I really enjoyed. I've talked a lot about Grunwald. I've talked a lot about he influenced both the storytelling that is from this era. He is exactly who Owen Wilson looks like. They modeled him after Grunwald. And the fun fact about that is the TVA agents in the comic books are all modeled after the editor-in-chief / continuity expert in real life, Mark Grunwald. So instead of making the TVA agents all clones, they made Mark Grunwald be a clone of how he looks in the form of Owen Wilson. It's a really fun little thing. They went a step further in this episode, and Mark Grunwald is from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So they could have put that Ren Fair in any country, any city, any place in the world, but they chose Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So I thought that was a lot of fun to give more Grunwald love in this show. We have a very big list of the branch timelines having incidents. So at the very end, if you pause on the craziness as it scrolls by, as the diverging timelines are happening, the branch timelines list Vormir, which is where the Soul Stone is based, the Soul Stone planet. So if there's a divergence there, does that mean Black Widow? Does that mean Red Skull? does that mean? Like, there's not a lot of people we associate with Vormir, so it's a very interesting place to have any sort of timey-wimey goodness. We've got Asgard, which is obviously very important to where we currently are in our continuity, so anything diverging there, that could change all sorts of things for Thor 4. We've got Titan, which is Thanos' home, very important place to list. I do believe we will see Thanos in the Eternals. Is there something that happens in this that leads to a storyline in the Eternals? Is there something that happens in this that changes things on the continuity of Titan? Because as we know, like, the whole reason the Infinity War happened was we lost Titan because of a lack of resources. So very curious about going back to Titan if that happens. Xandar, where the Guardians of the Galaxy are basically from, that's been destroyed. So will we see anything with Xandar going back and forth? Ego the Living Planet was listed, which I thought was a lot of fun because that is a in-continuity character thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but it's also one of the more absurd things to try to quantify a giant living planet played by Kurt Russell. And we've got Sakaar, which is where Planet Hulk was all taking place. Sakaar is a very near and dear beloved planet to modern comic book fans because Planet Hulk is one of those storylines. It's like, yeah, so Sakaar. And then Hala, which is not just a great thing to yell, but also the Kree-occupied planet of Hala, which is obviously the Skrull-Kree War. So all of these locations listed are, by definition, some of the most important places in all of Marvel Comics. So it is a very, very interesting thing to see. One, these names makes my nerd heart sing, but two, all of these places could actually change the foundation of the Marvel Universe going forward. They're all that important, and they only listed important ones. All of those things diverging, it's not like they just picked a random place in Oshkosh. They went with the big spots that were going to change everything in Phase 4. This is it. This is my favorite audio Easter egg in all of Marvel. Are you ready? I'm obsessed with David Fincher. This show is clearly a love letter to David Fincher. This is Mindhunter-esque. This is very much like his long-form shows. This is my favorite auditory Easter egg in Marvel. When Loki approaches the desk at the TVA and he talks to the librarian, and the librarian is I think, based off of the Monsters, Inc. librarian, even the glasses. When he approaches her, as he gets to the desk, the sound that plays is Bach's Orchestral Suite No. 3 in D major. It's a beautiful piece of work. It causes many emotions. It is a fantastic bit of art, but it's also the piece of music that can be heard when Detective Mills and Detective Somerset, yes, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman in Seven, approach the desk at the library doing their research. They literally gave us a David Fincher sound reference. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That made me so happy. I never thought we'd get a Seven reference in a Marvel property, much less getting a Loki show that would have a Seven reference in a show based around Fincher's visual aesthetic. What a moment. That made me so very happy. So listen to that again and then watch Seven and listen. That is the same audio cue. Wonderful little Easter egg for people like me. I really like the Frost Giant that they referenced in the Loki variants. There's one where he stayed a Frost Giant. There's Frost Loki. He's blue. It's a blue hologram, but he's also still blue. So I think it's really interesting that they're leaning into the Laufey Sun angle. Obviously, Odin's son is Thor, and how we leaned in the movies more is Loki, son of Odin, but he isn't. He's, the adopted son of Odin, so he's the son of Odin in many, many ways, but they keep referring to him as Laufey's son, and then there's that Frost Giant bit. So I'm really wondering if they're going to go toward the Frost Giant heritage of Loki. Obviously, the child in the cold reference, plus the Laufey son, plus the Frost Giant, and talking about why he's so broken, what betrayed him, and all those things. There's a scene in the library where they cut around all the library, and there's a giant 372 just hanging in the air. And obviously, comic books are usually the thing you look up with these numbers. In the first episode, I looked up dates a lot, and there was some dates and stuff we talked about last time I did a water cooler talk. But in this one, I was looking at this number. There is a Mighty Thor 372 that has a TVA agent on the cover. Now, the TVA is not that popular in the comic books. They're a deal, but they're not a big deal. So it's very rare that you got a Justice from the TVA on the cover. So this is one of the only times the TVA has been referenced on the cover. So I really like that they had that number as kind of a library marker to make comic fans go, ooh, and look up something. I didn't know that off the top of my head. When I looked it up, I was like, clever. We've got the Revengers getting a name drop in the files. If you remember in Thor Ragnarok, there was a file of Thor Ragnarok, and in the movie, Mark Ruffalo refers to the team they build as the Revengers. It's a great one-off joke. It's a very good Taika moment. But the Revengers was, Thor, Tessa, Loki, and Hulk, and it is so funny to see that as an accredited thing the TVA calls them. Like, yep, the Revengers tried to save Ragnarok. So there is a brief Revengers name drop in the file. We talked earlier about being stuck in the 90s. So Mobius's character refers to the 90s a lot. So Josta is the 90s drink that you see in the first episode and this one it comes back. But they also have Boku juice, which was discontinued in like 2003, that he takes from the clerk. And pours also in the salad when he's doing his great "this is why destruction absolves all, this is where he's hiding" speech. That's two drinks that are now discontinued from a similar period of time reference. Something going on there. I think that's a thing. The Horn Friends goat scene, I love that he got to hang out with people that he felt familiar with in the Pompeii Madness. And my favorite visual Easter egg, the visual Easter egg of the trucker toss. As Loki gets tossed, he lands, and they frame it in the exact same way that he lands in Infinity War, when he falls and falls and falls and falls and falls and lands, and that great joke about, do you have any idea how long I've been falling? The face, the exasperated face and landing was the exact same face and frame. So we get a visual throwback joke as well as all of the rest, and fantastic Easter eggs this episode, fantastic episode. I keep loving the existential crises we're going through together. I keep loving how fascinating the detective work of your own mind can be. Mindhunter is about serial killers. This Mindhunter is about the god of mischief looking at himself. So I'm loving Loki. I hope I addressed all your favorite moments, as well as some Easter eggs you might have missed, as well as some references you might have not caught from the comic books. Thank you for being here with me. I'll be back next week at the same bat time, same bat channel. We will be doing this, hopefully, at 10 a.m. next week with episode 3. I love breaking these down with you very much. It's one of the highlights of my week. Check out the Late Con with Coy Jandreau on YouTube. You can see all of them living there forever in beautiful little edits, thanks to my management team who makes me look good. Thank you guys. And tomorrow, on this very page, on this very Instagram Live, I will be going Disneyland and all of the Avengers Campus goodness that has just opened, and see the Spider-Man ride and get some Black Cat coffee and get all of that greatness. So I'll be touring around Disneyland with you guys on my Instagram Live. So if you want to see some of the Disney stuff, tune in here as I cover it on various platforms. That is tomorrow. So I am very excited. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being awesome. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week for episode 3, and I'll see you tomorrow at Disneyland. Much love, guys. See you soon.